All right, folks, welcome back. In just a second, we're going to be joined by David Tarfuri, former rule of law coordinator for Iraq at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. We've been talking to him over the past few weeks and months from Erbil in Iraq, where he was. He's back now, and we'll discuss his trip and get his take on the latest on the ISIS situation. I did want to mention, remember the father who left his son in the car in Atlanta, down in Georgia? Well, this is 2 months ago by now, which can't believe time goes so quickly. Prosecutors say, well, a grand jury rather has indicted Justin Ross Harris on multiple charges, including malice murder, felony murder, and cruelty to children. So this is going to be very, very interesting. If you recall at the time during the hearing to see whether or not he should be held. Lots and lots came out about his sexting and about his attitude and looking up things on the web, such as how to suffocate children or what happens if a child stays in a car too long, and animals when they don't have enough air and in a hot setting, and what life is like, how to live a childless life, all these kinds of things. The comments, the bizarre comments made by his wife allegedly. So this is going to be very interesting to follow going forward. And this is very important, and it's kind of gotten lost in all the news today, the news cycle. Remember the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, the panel in that court ruled or called into question and said that the subsidies for Obamacare were unconstitutional, they were illegal. Well, they have now vacated that panel decision, and they have agreed for the entire court to hear the case at the request of the Obama administration. So that case involving the premiums and the subsidies for the premiums under Obamacare, which many considered a victory, those who were against Obamacare, that's now gone, and they're going to, the whole D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia will hear that case. So that's something else we will be following as the weeks and months go on. Before we go to David Tarfuri, I want us all to take a look at this.
The deputy leader of Kurdistan in your interview, what's happening on the ground? They are not receiving heavy weapons from the United States, despite assurances a few weeks ago that we had changed our policy, despite the fact that they are the ones on the ground who can liberate the cities and conduct the ground operations with American air power. And yet, because of ridiculous legalisms, we have to route this through Baghdad, knowing A, that Baghdad is not going to send it up to Kurdistan, and B, that Baghdad is likely to lose it, and it's going to end up in the hands of ISIS.
All right, folks, Charles Krauthammer, not too many people smarter than him, and joining us now is David Tarfuri, former rule of law coordinator for Iraq at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and partner at Patton Boggs Law Firm. And welcome back, David.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be back.
All right, so it was great, by the way. Thank you for joining us so many times from Erbil in Iraq. It was wonderful to have you there and to give us the latest as it was happening. And now you're back, and now you've seen our president in action, like the rest of us, I guess. Where are we with the threat? Let's focus in the region. Let's focus on what Charles was talking about and the Kurds. I mean, for crying out loud, we still haven't given the Kurds and their fighters the arms that they have requested and so desperately need to maintain, to combat ISIS and to protect themselves, have we?
That's correct. We have not. When I was in Erbil and also in Sulaymaniyah, I was working with the Kurdistan regional government officials. They've made very clear what they need to match ISIS in terms of weapons. Right now, they're completely outgunned by ISIS. They passed along requests to the U.S. government. The U.S. government is facilitating the delivery of some weapons, but it's mostly light weapons, not really what they need to confront the heavily armored vehicles that ISIS has.
So, I mean, God forbid, but when and if, the confrontation occurs and they head into a town or an area controlled and maintained by the Kurdish forces, and again, God forbid, the Kurdish forces get overrun and we see beheadings and we see all kinds of atrocities, and something that the media and the president doesn't talk about, and that's taking the women into slavery as sex slaves. I mean, who are they gonna blame but us?
Well, I mean, this has actually already happened, as you know, when ISIS directed its attacks on the Kurdistan region. Some of the towns were just not prepared for the heavily armored, heavily weaponized ISIS, fierce fighters who have been barbaric in their approach to taking over towns and cities. That's why we had the crisis with the Yazidis on Sinjar Mountain. They all had to flee all of a sudden. So the Kurdish forces that found themselves fighting ISIS were just simply not able to match the firepower. And that's what needs to be corrected. The U.S. government is doing some really good things. The airstrikes have made a tremendous difference. They've really put ISIS back on its heels. But now we need to have a fighting force on the ground that can equal the ISIS fighters in terms of firepower. That's the only way we're going to contain them, but really the goal should be not just to contain them, but to defeat them.
And this is, I mean, as far as you know, a decision that the president could just, make and get those weapons there. I mean, I remember, for crying out loud, when Richard Nixon saved Israel during the Yom Kippur War. I mean, it's not that hard to do. Why on earth is it not being done?
Well, that's a question for the administration to answer. I think Charles Krauthammer's comments are right on point. There's some view that Baghdad needs to approve of weapons deliveries, but the problem is when Baghdad has to approve, that means a lot of the weapons just don't even make it. If you have to fly into Baghdad first and open up the plane and show the Baghdad officials and come up with some reasons why they don't want to deliver those types of weapons to the Kurds, and you end up leaving the Kurds without the weapons they need to really confront ISIS and fight the battles that we need them to fight on the ground in northern Iraq.
Yeah, all right. Now, as far as the president and his statements over the past week, a week ago, as you well know, we were told that there is no strategy on ISIS. Here we are a week later, still no strategy. And the way I know that is because the president told us and told ISIS, by the way, that when he gets a strategy, he'll announce it to the Congress, and then the Congress will debate it, and then they'll vote on it, and then maybe he'll implement it. That's not the way to be effective against this group of whatever you want to call them.
Well, the president has to strike a balance between disclosing what he's doing to the public and to Congress, but doing it in a way that it's going to be effective. The comment about not having a strategy is, frankly, a little surprising. ISIS didn't arrive in Iraq yesterday or last week. I mean, they've been there since the middle of June, and they've been a threat since the very beginning of their invasion of Iraq, a very significant threat. They hold the second biggest city in Iraq, Mosul. So there should be a strategy in place. I certainly hope that the U.S. government is putting one together and that it will be put in place and implemented as soon as possible. Again, the airstrikes are part of the strategy, and that's been a really successful part of the strategy. Let's hope that the rest of the strategy to defeat ISIS on the ground is put in place as quickly as possible.
We had Robert Bud McFarlane on earlier in the show. He, of course, a national security advisor to Ronald Reagan and SDI architect. He said that the only way to do this is to form that coalition that the president talks about, but to actually get on it and form it. And then it's going to take about 1,000 American boots on the ground in the form of advisors and special ops forces to lead the charge, to instruct where the airstrike should be, the whole thing, and it'll take about a year, and that's how you beat ISIS. Now, the president yesterday, in contradictory statements, almost, just about a couple of minutes apart, said, we're going to get rid of ISIS, we're going to beat him, etc. And then he said we could make ISIS a manageable problem. So, which would you urge the president to do, and how would you urge him to go about it? Is the McFarlane scenario realistic to you?
The McFarlane scenario sounds realistic to me. I'm not a military expert, so I'll leave it to him in terms of the number of people needed, the amount of time needed. I do very firmly believe that you can't have a strategy to just contain ISIS or manage the problem. It's not a problem that can be managed. The only thing they will understand is direct confrontation militarily, and the only way that they'll stop committing atrocities, stop trying to fulfill their goals of creating a barbaric Islamic state across Iraq is if they're completely defeated. And we should be putting our effort and focus into that By the way, that's exactly what the government of Iraq officials in Baghdad believe. That's what the officials in the Kurdistan region believe as well. They don't believe ISIS can be contained. They don't believe the country can go on with ISIS in the middle of the country holding that much territory.
One more, David, for a man in your former capacity at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. What do you think? What goes through your mind when you see the takeover, the terrorists swimming in the swimming pool at the former U.S. Compound in Tripoli?
Well, I've done a lot of work in Libya as well, and I've been to that compound, and it's really unfortunate to see that has happened. I mean, Libya is going through its own set of struggles, and obviously the U.S. has had some difficulties there. We have to protect our U.S. personnel, so I understand why they decided to evacuate the embassy. I certainly wish, though, that they had protected the embassy, and I hope that there are plans in place to protect the embassy. We do need to go back there. We need to have diplomats in Tripoli fully engaged to make sure that Libya works out to be a stable democracy, which is what everybody hopes.
David Tarfuri, always great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And welcome back. All right, folks, there you go. By the way, we're going to come back at what Eric Holder did today in launching a federal investigation into or against the police force in Ferguson. Before we go, though, we want your opinion. Should the U.S. strike ISIS in Syria? Go to newsmax.com/poll and vote now.